Okay, so in this last video, what I'm going to be covering is matinee, and we're also going to be doing some very basic post-processing effects. So we're going to move it out of the foliage tool now. And if you go to the blueprints folder, you'll see that I've created an object here called marker. I click and drag that in. This is now something for the character to aim for, and it'll, rather than that number just choosing a random point on the map, it's actually going to have something to target at the top of the hill, which is good. Although what you will get in this situation when you reach it, if you remember from the beginning of the tutorial, when I walked up to the object, it would trigger a camera sequence. We don't have a camera sequence in our level, so what we're actually going to get is an error. And the reason for that is if you look in the details of this object, you can see that the matinee category is empty. So it's running the collision event, so when you collide with it, to trigger the matinee sequence. And it's just saying, sorry, no, we don't have this available, so it's throwing a wobbly. So we'll be fixing that in a moment. The first thing that I'd like to do though is make this environment a little bit more kind of, add some basic effects to the environment. The first that's probably going to create a greater sense of scale is we're going to add some exponential height fog. Obviously based on the if you can grab that from the visual effects category, some things that you're probably going to want to add is you're going to want to change the colouring of it, because based on what scene you've got, I've got this very bright pale blue, when realistically what I'm wanting to do is kind of create like a sunset colouring. And I can also change the colouring of the light from the sun. It's a very gross colour. Not much better actually. Don't want it to be too harsh. But yeah, so I've got that's immediately you can see the difference that makes to kind of creating a little bit of a little bit more atmosphere to the level, and when you stand on top of something like a if you stand on top of something like a hill overlooking an area, the first thing you use to kind of determine the scale of things is the haze, and how far an object looks away from you. So you can see now this is looking a little bit more grander than it did previously. And if you wanted to add some kind of post-processing effects as well, I'll just chuck something very basic on there. In this case, I'm going to make it that when we move within the range of the... Where did that go? Oh, so when we move within the range of this object, it's going to change the colouring of the player, of what the player sees. So if I just scale this up, this is essentially just going to be a volume, and if we enter that, it's going to change what the player sees. I'm going to make this a tetrahedron, which is a fancy word for something that mildly resembles a sphere. So if I move into this space now, I'm just going to jump my character over just a little bit to save some time. Let's just check that again. Oh, okay, so the reason that it's not having any effect is because we haven't given it any effects to change yet. So if I go to settings, and in fact we should be able to test this without the character being over here. If I go to settings, I'm just going to make a very basic change. So I'm going to just change the scene color So when I move into the range of this, I'm going to apply like a blue tint. So when I move in range, it's going to create like a blue tint to the world. Maybe even add like a weird fringe effect. It kind of world warps when you get close to it. It's probably a little bit painful to look at, but it should be, you know, reasonably cool when you move in range of it. And what's great as well is that you can set, you know, there's a bunch of variables you can change at the bottom here. So things like the blend radius. So you could make it so as you, rather than it being an immediate effect, it's a bit more, you know, it has a greater, you could set this to potentially affect over the entire level. So start off somewhere over here, nice and happy. You know, so for example, you could have something like a dark woods that as you move closer and closer into the woods, it gets, you know, more and more eerie and evil. You know, so you can see it's starting to really kick in now as I'm getting closer and closer to the object. Probably not gonna, in the interest of me not burning my eyes out, I'm not gonna have it affect that far. But that'll probably do. So the thing that we're gonna change at this point is we're having, you know, made some basic post-processing effects. Another thing you might want to look into as well, just real quick, is you've got the unbound effect. Sorry, unbound checkbox. That if you check it, that makes it affect the entire level rather than just that one space. And you can also change its blend weight that determines how much it's affecting the level. You can tweak those with code, which is really useful if you wanted to have, you know, a shader that was, sorry, a post-processing effect that kicks in when you trigger some kind of event in the level that isn't necessarily, you know, you walking into a space. It could be the time of day. You know, you want it to at a certain time of the day suddenly begin to get darker and darker, or if you move within range of a certain character within your game, it begins to darken the screen, or, you know, if you're underwater and you run out of oxygen, you begin to get a vignette and the screen darken, something like that. There's a bunch of different, you know, things available, which is great. But for now, what we're going to do is we're going to focus on the matinee sequence. So we're going to create a basic camera pan that's going to kind of move away from our object and, you know, fly back to the start of the level. And this shouldn't take too long to set up. Whoops. So let's, to begin with this, let's go to the place tool and we're going to search for the word camera. Just click and drag that in. You'll notice that the camera is also, you know, influenced by the post-processing effect as well, which is quite useful. Maybe a little bit painful for our eyes whilst we're manipulating it, but that'll be fine. We can always toggle it on and off if needs be. So what we're going to do from here, we've got our camera in position now. This is essentially what we're going to be switching to when we, you know, when we reach this object. There we go, nice setup there. So from here, what we're going to do is we're going to open up matinee. So if I click on matinee and click add matinee, it's going to bring up the matinee panel. And within here, just to kind of summarize through this again, you've got your different tracks, which is essentially where you're going to add your different types of, you know, animation or changes. So for example, you might have a camera track, you might have, you know, a door opening and closing, or in the case of what we're going to be creating, we're going to be making a director track. You've got your wave editor, which is, you know, if you're wanting to go in a little bit further into kind of tweaking the animation of things, you can access it here. And then you've got your details panel here to the side as well, which are all kind of very useful for what we're planning to do. So what we're going to do first, we're going to create what's known as a director group. So add new director group, and that's essentially going to allow us to switch from, you know, the default camera that we had to, you know, this other camera that we've just created. You might also want to grab this little green flag here and drag it all the way to the end to match the length of your sequence. And to do that, It's literally just click and drag, so don't worry about that too much. Now what we want to do is we're going to add a new keyframe for our director, because for us to change the camera we need to add a keyframe. So click on that. Rather than usually just creating a keyframe in the level, it's going to ask you which group you want to cut to. Now at the moment there's only one group called director group, but you'll remember that we made a camera. So you might be thinking, well where is it? The issue is that we need to create that group within Matinee. So to do that we need to just back up off of this for just a moment, select our camera within the level, and make sure you have it selected, because otherwise this won't work. And then right click within the tracks section and click add new camera group, and that way we will actually have something to reference. So I'm just going to call this camera. Now if this has worked, this applies for your camera and it applies for any object that you create within Matinee. You should have a little camera next to it. That little icon there means that you've actually selected it and it can find it within Matinee. So now that we've created that, we can go back to our director and add a new key event. So if I click on that little drop down here, you should see now camera is listed as well as the director group. So if I click camera, click OK, you'll see now that it's created a coloured bar to indicate which camera is in control. And yeah, so from here we need to let's just give that a very quick, in fact we can't give it a quick test just yet. Let's create ourselves some keyframes for our camera. So to do that, what we're going to want to do is just click back onto the movement of our camera, and we're going to need to make a couple of keyframes. So I'm just going to click, let's say 2 seconds in, and I'm just going to click add key. Now there's two options to this. We can either manually move our camera, which is an option. It gives us a degree of control to our object, and that's great. And now if we move back and forth, that's doing what we want. And we can preview it here. It's kind of a bit fiddly on one screen, but you can adjust this to kind of cater to your needs. So I'm just going to get rid of the director group and just have these visible. This is quite hard to arrange. But yeah, you can see that this is, it's possible to manipulate all of these at once. It's a little bit fiddly, especially as you can see that I'm having to kind of juggle all these different viewports simultaneously. Another alternative to doing this is if you go back to this first keyframe, if I switch the perspective to my camera actor, I'm now within the view of the camera. So that's what the camera is seeing. So if I move the timeline along a little bit and then click add key and then just move this to the side and choose a new location, I can now, you can see that there's a little yellow dot here to indicate the first point on this. So if I move back and forth, you can see that now we have an animated sequence. So from here, I'm just going to extend this a little bit further. So I'm going to, if you want to move the position of keyframes, you need to hold control and then click. So I'm just going to extend that back a bit further. And you might be wondering why I've got such a small movement for such a short period of time. The code that I've created has a 10-second cinematic. So we need to bring this red flag past 10 seconds, as well as the green flag. So that was the reason why I had the, I was using so much of the animated sequence there just for one movement, because I actually had twice that amount of space. So if I now choose somewhere like here, so add keyframe and move somewhere else, and then choose another keyframe and move to somewhere else, can see now. Oh, whoops. Choose keyframe and then move to somewhere else, but then forget to actually create a new keyframe. There you go. You can see that now I've got this nice smooth track. And each point along that way, I've been seeing through the viewport exactly what you're going to be seeing in the cinematic. So yeah, I'm happy with that. Just to kind of give you something if you really want to tweak it and kind of dabble into this further, it's something that I feel like I should mention just because it's so hard to find. If you click this little tiny grey box here, if anyone can find somewhere else to locate this that isn't this ridiculously small box here, if you click on this, it's going to show you the curves of you know, how you're going to manipulate the camera in the level. Now this isn't very useful as a way of viewing it because it's stretched so much across them. You know, this is measuring in, you know, units vertically and, you know, in various directions, which goes from nothing to very extreme values very quickly. So if we scale this horizontally and vertically, we now have two curves that are easier to manipulate. And you've got a couple of options with this. You know, you can do stuff like literally moving these things up and down. Another option would be to select specific ones, and then you could change the type of movement that it's using. So, for example, you could just bear with me a sec. You know, I could select each of these and switch it from I'll just get the camera visible in the background so you can see this at the same time. Rather than, you know, a curve, I've got it. You know, I could set it to a constant. And what that would do in this case would be, rather than, you know, a nice smooth curve, you'd get like a snap. So as if you were whoops, bear with me a second, switching to the wrong things. You would get it switching cameras. Quite jarring, to be honest, but you know, you could essentially create the appearance of, you know, a camera, like a director switching between different, you know, cameras. And you know, you can go in and refine this, and you know, you could add a bit more bounce to the movements of your cameras. There's a lot of stuff that you can refine. I mean, let me just quickly. I have to be very quick with this because I've got somewhere to be in a very quick moment. Actually, no, I'll leave it for now. But you know, you can essentially experiment with the curves and do various stuff there. So the last thing that we need to do is just eject from the camera itself. Even if we test this now, it's still not going to work because of the fact that we still haven't linked that matinee sequence. So to do that, we need to add one more thing, which is going to be just going back to this object one more time, this marker. We need to create a matinee. We need to link this matinee sequence. So where there was nothing before, you can see now we have a matinee actor listed, which we can now access. So if I click on that and I press play and very quickly hurry through my level, you can see the value going down. As I said, feel free to pick that apart in your own time. You know, the resources are all, you know, out there. But you can see now that this is, that's good. And then the level resets. So yeah, I hope you found that very useful. Yeah, if there's any other questions, feel free to just leave them in the comments. And yeah, just keep an eye out for the next few tutorials. They should be, I've managed to get my, well, I've managed to take these chunks of video footage and actually make them exportable for YouTube. So yeah, these tutorials should be coming out a lot more often than they have been. So yeah, thanks for watching.